Hello, and welcome to an Uncredible show. No one's source for any kind of political discussion of any kind, unless you're a moron. So, from time to time, some ghosts ask me, Jay, why do you keep talking about how the system is broken? And it's not Republicans and Democrats versus each other, it's them versus us. And you ask me why do I say sweet cash rules everything around us? Well, the answer to the former is that I say that it's them versus us because somebody else said it and I agreed with it and I stole it from them and I'm trying to pawn it off as my own idea. The answer to the second part is that it's self-evident that the words of Wycliffe Jean are, if that's how you pronounce, the Almighty's name, are infallible. In which case it would follow logically, since corporations are allowed to donate unlimited money to politicians under the laughable condition that they do not coordinate directly with the politician's campaign. However, I know there are a lot of good spirits out there who suffer from doubts. We all do. And I must confess, I'm not immune to moments of weakness either. I know you ghosts do too because the messages you send me directly to my brain while I sleep say, Jay, when we asked you how you know the teachings of Lord Wycliffe are true, you said, because Wycliffe told us so, and his teachings are righteous. Now, of course, my first instinct is to conduct a reverse seance and banish you from my studio for being blasphemers, but neither of us wants that, so let me try to defend my claims using evidence independent of Wycliffe's lyrics. You mentioned the circular argument. Well, hold that imagery in whatever space there is between your ethereal cranium that the living among us would call a brain, as I explain. Perhaps the most obvious evidence of the influence of money in politics is described aptly, in my opinion, as the revolving door. I don't know how long people have been using this term, but the revolving door. Let me explain what it is, and then I'll give some examples. The revolving door, obviously, it's imagery. If you picture a revolving door, you go through it to the inside, the outside. It keeps spinning. If you want to, you could, go in for a little bit and then come straight back out. You could just keep taking the revolving door in and out over and over without stopping. And, as a metaphor, it's apt because that's what politicians do. Now, the best example that I've seen is probably with the sheer number of people from Goldman Sachs that used to work at Goldman Sachs that now work in the government, and I'll just list the ones in the Obama administration, and there are plenty of other ones, going back decades that worked for Goldman Sachs that were appointed by other presidents. So there's somebody named Diana Farrell. She was the deputy director. She is the deputy, or excuse me. Yes, I believe is the current deputy director of the National Economic Council. She used to be a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs. Stephen Friedman, he is the chairman of the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. He used to be the board member at Goldman Sachs, and now he's currently a director, if I'm reading that right. Gary Gensler, Futures Trading Commission, used to be partner and co-head of finance at Goldman Sachs. Robert Hormats, Philip Murphy, Mark Patterson, John Thain. And, of course, there from the Bush administration, there are some more infamous people. I'll just name one. If you recall, Henry Paulson, the Secretary of the Treasury from 2006 to 2009. And during some of that same time, he was also, up until that point, he had been the chairman and CEO. Now, I know what you're thinking. These are the honorable gentlemen and gentlewomen, and of course they're able to separate their duties as public servants from their private interests. Well, you got me there. If they're in Washington, by definition, they are honorable. perhaps in much the same way the new head of the SEC is, Mary Jo White. How honorable is she? Let me explain. So there was this attorney named Gary Aguirre who joined the SEC. And by the way, the SEC, if you don't know, is the Securities and Exchange Commission. Among other things, they're responsible for investigating any potential insider trading, and some other things. We'll just focus on that because that's what's relevant to this case. So this attorney was asked. I'm not sure by who because there's so much corruption in the SEC, but I'm getting ahead of myself. He was asked to look into reports of suspicious trading involving a hedge fund guy named Art Sandberg, who made $18 million in a period of short weeks before a particular merger. This article I read, it's from Rolling Stone, so I'm going to quote here. Matt Taibbi wrote the article, and he quotes Aguirre saying, there were some days when he referring to Art Sandberg, was trying to buy 3 times as many shares as were being traded that day, referring to shares in this firm's merger. So of all the total shares that were being traded, this one guy was trying to trade 3 times as many. So I'd say grounds for suspicion, right? And by the way, read everything Matt Taibbi writes whenever you get a chance. He's a fantastic journalist. So what happened was this guy Aguirre tried to get an interview with a third guy named John Mack, who had just stepped down from Morgan Stanley and had been interviewing with an investment banking firm for the company that Art Sandberg was trading stock in so aggressively, all of a sudden. So, as soon as Aguirre realized this, it looked incredibly suspicious. So he went through his chain of command at the SEC in an attempt to get an interview with John Mack. And Matt Taibbi points out in the article that he wasn't trying to get him, do rendition on him to, get him somewhere and torture him or indict him. He was just trying to get an interview, right? So clearly within the purview of his job. And what happened? He was denied, of course. And I'm going to try to make a long story short. He persisted, but lo and behold, a lawyer named Mary Jo White, representing at the time Morgan Stanley, went over Aguirre's head to, as Taibbi puts it, his boss's boss at the SEC. So a little bit over Aguirre's head, right? And the investigation was terminated. Depositions were canceled. No subpoenas were issued. Now, that's an injustice, right, in and of itself. But the twist of the knife was that right after that, Aguirre, this poor motherfucker trying to do his fucking job, was fired without warning or cause. Now, I don't know if you want to look at this as a silver lining because he was able to get out of a totally corrupt institution with some benefit. Namely, he ended up settling for something along the lines of $750,000 in a wrongful termination suit. Which, by the way, if you compare that to the $18 million the one guy made, I mean that's the cost of doing business, bro. I mean, right? Which is the case with so much of the fraud that goes on in the financial industry, which I'll touch on a little bit later. So just to finish this up, in case the point of this was lost in my rambling way of storytelling, this lady, Mary Jo White, she was just appointed. Now, so this all happened in 2004. She was just appointed to the head of the SEC now. Now, what the fuck? She, in the capacity that she was working before, it was for a firm that represented Morgan Stanley. And now she's the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is supposed to be looking into banks like Morgan Stanley. Seems like a conflict of interest, right? on its face. But worse, and this is something that I mentioned on the show a couple days ago, you could say, if she's not obvious, she's an honorable gentlewoman, right? She did her time in the private sector, and now she's giving back. She's going to go to the government, and she's going to provide a public service. Well, it gets worse, right? If it wasn't obvious enough, there's a conflict of interest just from the fact that she's supposed to be regulating the people, overseeing the people that she knows personally, that she used to work for and with. She has a retirement plan with the firm that she worked for when she was representing Morgan Stanley and other banks to the tune of $42,000 a month. Now, excuse me, how much clearer does the conflict have to be, right? I'm getting another call to my brain from a ghost. Telepathy. Jay, all you gave us was a list of previous Goldman Sachs people and one ex-lawyer. You don't have anything more substantial than that to try to prove your point that the system is totally corrupt? Something that could actually... Don't you have something that could actually indict more than just a few people on this claim of corruption characterized by the so-called Revolving Door? Well, I don't, but Taibbi, as I've said, is an awesome journalist. So let's look at an article he did in February of 2011. This article is called Why Isn't Wall Street in Jail? A title with not an excessive amount of ambiguity, right? So what were the financial industries doing that led up to the 2008 collapse, and how easily did they get off? Now, this part's going to be a little dense. I'm just going to go quickly through a bunch of the different financial companies and list what they were, the amount of money over which or with which they committed fraud, and then the amount that they were fined. Right? In 2003, Freddie Mac, and this is a quote, so it's I'm reading it word for word. This is Matt Taibbi's words. In 2003, Freddie Mac coughed up $125 million after it was caught misreporting its earnings by $5 billion. Nobody went to jail. In 2006, Fannie Mae was fined $400 million, but executives who had overseen phony accounting techniques to jack up their bonuses faced no criminal charges. That same year, AIG paid $1.6 billion after it was caught in a major accounting scandal that would indirectly lead to its collapse 2 years later. But no executives at the insurance giant were prosecuted. Bank of America, you still with me? Bank of America was caught hiding $5.8 billion in bonuses from shareholders as part of its takeover of Merrill Lynch. The Securities and Exchange Commission tried to let the bank off with a settlement of only $33 million. You get that? So Bank of America was caught hiding $5.8 billion, and the SEC, the company charged with overseeing these institutions was trying to fine them for $33 million. Now, I suck at math, but I know that is an incredibly small fraction of talk about the cost of doing business. That is a great deal, $5.8 billion, and all you got to do is pay $33 million. But fortunately, or I guess unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the judge rejected that action as he called it a facade of enforcement, which is a pretty good way to describe this whole situation, I would say. It's my opinion. So in that case, the case of Bank of America, the SEC decided, okay, fuck it. I guess we can't get away with that. We will quintuple the settlement. So instead of $33 million, more like around $170 million or so. Like I said, I'm not good at math. Still, $5.8 billion. They only had to pay $170 million. Please. Finally, Citigroup nailed for hiding some $40 billion in liabilities from investors. Last July, the SEC settled with Citibank for $75 million. $40 billion. And they settled for $75 million. And he goes on to say, in a rare move, it also fined 2 city executives, Okay, so I mean they got away with that, but 2 of the CEOs got fined. That's something. The CEOs and the other ones didn't get fined, right? I mean, those other guys weren't liable for whatever happened. I mean, they were just running the company. I mean, they're not responsible for any of that stuff that happened. They're just the CEO. So but they did fine these guys. Dramatic turn of events. How much did they get fined for? I would ask you to guess if you could talk. But my guess is that whatever you guessed would be too high. $180,000. Now, in fairness to those CEOs, that's probably a higher percentage of what they earned than the $75 million is of the $40 billion. But I mean, they're going to be able to pay their rent. Let's put it that way. And they didn't go to jail. Now, that's the thing that ties all of these things together is nobody. The consequences were so far from dire. The cliche dire consequences that it doesn't just not function as a deterrent. It actually sort of prods them on. It encourages them to keep doing the same shit that they're doing, and which is a sentiment that Matt Taibbi has in the article as well, which you just take my word for is there or read for yourself. Now let's see. Here's a note that I made. I was going to make a comparison. So let's say that you get caught dealing drugs, right? Let's just put it in a little perspective. They're going to let you off with a fine that amounts to a fraction of what you made, right? No, and obviously you're not going to get any jail time, or and here's another thing they never had to do. None of these fuckers had to admit any wrongdoing, right? So it gets essentially expunged from their record. What are the chances that you get caught trafficking drugs? Well, I mean, who knows? I mean, if you have enough money, you could bribe the police or whatever. Maybe you do get away with it. So yeah, I guess it is analogous to the banks. For Christ's sake. Fuck no, you're not going to get away with it. So what does this have to do with the revolving door? And if my premise is correct, the overall corruption of the system. Well, remember that guy Guire we just talked about? You probably can remember since it wasn't that many minutes ago, although it's more likely that you just simply are not listening to this anymore because it sucks. I got to stop doing that. There's a fine line between self-deprecating and, a major turnoff because you're just being totally depressing, which is nuanced in a slightly different way, again, from, how these stories are depressing, inherently because of the substance of them. You can figure out all that crap for yourselves. Taibbi puts it this way, speaking on this overall issue of these banking companies not going to jail. He quotes Aguirre, who said, criminal justice, as it pertains to the Goldmans and the Morgan Stanleys of the world, is not adversarial combat with cops and crooks duking it out in interrogation rooms and courthouses. Instead, it's a cocktail party between friends and colleagues who, from month to month and year to year, are giving each other hands. No, he doesn't say that. Are constantly switching sides and trading hats. That's the diplomatic way to say they're blowing each other. They're all the same people. They work on the same sides. If the cops and the robbers at any given time, this is me talking now, not him. If the cops and robbers at any given time might be on one side or the other, and they know that at some point they're obviously going to be on the opposite side that they are now, they're going to go easy on each other because they want their asses scratched in return. I'll scratch your ass, you scratch mine. It reminds me of sociology from college to get, on my high horse. If I'm recalling correctly, there are these 3 different ways that humans interact with each other, right? You got your egoism, which is you only look out for yourself. You got your altruism, where you only look out for others. And then you have utilitarianism, which is the one where you scratch my ass and I'll scratch yours. Now, I always like that last one the best. And it sounds like that's what the banks are doing, except there's a part of the equation that's left out, right? No one scratches our asses, the regulators at the SEC. And by the way, the SEC is only one of these oversight organizations. There are a whole ton of them, and they're all like this. They jerk each other off, and nobody helps us. It's at our expense. We aren't anywhere near them. Unless they're Stretch Armstrong, they're not going to be scratching our ass. They help each other, and they kick our asses. Their legs are that long, but they're not going to be scratching them. Which is evidenced with the $700 billion bailout that came out of our pockets. After which, not a single one of those bitches went to jail and had to pay minuscule fines. So, connecting this to the present, right? Oh, remember that lady, Mary Jo White, I mentioned before? Obama just appointed her to the SEC. So let me just sort of recount. I've lost track to how many times she's gone through the revolving door. That I know of. She was working at that law firm representing Morgan Stanley. Before that, at some point before that, I think she worked at the SEC, and now she's working at the SEC again. And it's grotesque, and that's just scratching the surface of the entire financial industry, because I don't have time to go into the details, but mostly I just don't understand the details either. It's so vast, and there are so many tentacles that it's hard to keep track of. It's an Uncredible show. It's in the title. I don't have to know all these things. I just by decree I'm allowed to be ignorant. But let me just talk about some other revolving door appointments that are bound to kick our asses a little bit more. I did a show on Monsanto the other day, and if you can stand the horrible audio quality and the exorbitant amount of times I said the word Monsanto, you can go back and check it out if you want to. But for purposes here, I'll just assert that they are a hugely corrupt, gigantic, multinational agricultural conglomerate that has a history of distorting facts and spending huge amounts of money and lobbying and contributing to campaigns and buying immunity from future litigation and all kinds of other shit. So, in the U.S., we have this thing called the Food and Drug Administration, right? Okay, let's just stop here for a philosophy break. I always start to say that word wrong. Philosophy break is what I want to say. Philosophy break. What is the point of having government oversight? Well, I guess if you're a libertarian, you might say there is no point, right? Markets just oversee themselves and self-regulate, and like the mining industry did, right? Reducing the number of mining deaths per year from like 450 or so to, I think last year it was 19. Oh, wait, no, that was because of the Federal Mine Safety and Health Act of 1977, right? Okay, dig it, libertarians. By the way, how do you think that really works, right? People die in mines over and over, and eventually enough people die. The way that these corporations work, eventually it's just going to be like so many people have died that they have to do regulations, because if any more people die, there won't be anybody left to work in the coal mines. Is that how it works? Okay, so fuck that. Libertarians, I love you. I love, about half of who you are. The economic side of it, I think you're completely wrong. But that aside, let's just assert that the point of oversight is to keep, even if you disagree with how effective oversight is versus, the pure free market, pure capitalism. Regardless, the point of oversight is to keep private institutions from running away with constantly escalating greed and corruption, right? Which I think is self-evident, but, maybe I'm wrong. regardless, people are going to pursue self-interest, especially people in power. I mean, if a CEO knows he can gain short-term profits for himself at the expense and stability of the company he works for, or even the global economy, well, we know he's going to do it, and that's exactly what those fuckers did, right? Now, who's going to be the person to keep him in check? Let me ask it another way. Who's the one person that we shouldn't put in charge of keeping him in check, right? I know it's obvious. I don't want to insult your intelligence by spelling it out. Themselves, obviously, they shouldn't be in charge of overseeing themselves. And by the way, if you read the news today, neither should Eric Holder. Yeah, it's the most obvious thing in the world. I agree. But the fact that these people are still being appointed seems to be an indication that not enough people are aware either that it's going on or how big of a problem it is. And it's not your fault. It wasn't my fault when I didn't know about it. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time harping on whose fault it is, the media. Okay, I need to wrap this up and wind down a little bit if I'm going to be able to sleep tonight. If you want to know more about the Revolving Door, you can Google it, and you'll find, endless lists full of this kind of garbage. All these people, Goldman Sachs, every industry. I was going to talk about Monsanto. Look into that. They have a long history and a long list of people that used to work for Monsanto, that worked for the government, then went back into the food industry. I'm sure by now I've convinced all of you ghosts out there just how corrupt the system is, right? I mean, that was the point of this. And what was the point of doing this as the topic for the show? Well, so that from now on I can refer to this show as a kind of context through which I can talk about more current news stories, so I don't have to keep sort of supporting with evidence the idea that the system is the way it is. This is my sort of base, my basis for that. But you must be wondering, well, I mean, Jesus Christ, isn't there any kind of law in place to keep this kind of bullshit from piling up? Keep this kind of revolving door from ruling our lives? Well, the answer is yes, sort of. Just a little bit. And you're gonna have to take this with a grain of salt too, because as the Uncredible show, there's gonna be parts that I haven't researched. The law is something like you have to wait 2 years after leaving office before you're allowed to become a lobbyist. Now, this is going to be off the top of my head. I remember reading something like over the last 10 years, 5,000 staffers from Washington have become lobbyists, and most of them make at least six figures, and it's not uncommon for them to make at least $1 million. And the other fact, although obviously grain of salt, bucket of salt, bucket of ice melt, better for the environment, is that the most recent time that 2-year deadline was up, so politicians get out of office, their staffers stop working for them, and then they have to wait 2 years. The most recent time that 2-year deadline was up, some huge percentage of the staffers and former congressmen that day that the deadline was up became lobbyists. Find the percentage. I think it was something like 40% of them, which is an insane number. That might be wrong. 40%. That seems way too high. But whatever it was staggering. Check it out online somewhere. But yeah, some safeguard, right? 2 years. Clearly, that's working. I mean, it's the proof's in the pudding. You can see with through the results. We got to get the money out of politics. If we're going to end all this corruption. I mentioned Cenk Uygur the other day, host of the Young Turks. I'm a fan. Check out, I'm going to put a link to the website. It's called Wolfpack. I'm a member. And it might be our only hope, Obi-Wan. By the way, my opinion is that it should be at least 10 years before they're allowed to be lobbyists. If lobbyists, if they have to exist at all, I mean, a perfect world, they would all be... I'm not going to say what I think should actually happen to them. I mean, they're pursuing their own self-interest. It's the system. It's not the people, right? and former generals. They should be banned for life for becoming lobbyists, at least for the military-industrial complex. That's my opinion. Just saying. All right, ghosts. I hope it wasn't too long, too rambling. I'm working on it. At least I got the audio a little bit better, I think. Sometimes I envy you, ghosts. And that's not a cry for help. I'll just leave it at that. All right. Good night.